Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to set aside the diseases for a moment, the diagnostics, and really dive deep into the fundamentals of medical physiology.
Yeah.
We're talking about the operating manual for the human body, not when it breaks, but how it actually works.
And our mission here is really to understand the science behind that, the
Yeah.
coordination. I mean, how do 65 trillion cells...
Oh, yeah. It's just an incredible
So
number.
it's an incredible number. And how do they all, organize into tissues and organs, integrate their functions to cope with this constant environmental change? This is all about the integration needed just to maintain health.
And from a clinical perspective, that's what's so fascinating. Physicians, we often focus on the pathology, the illness itself.
Right.
But this research reminds us that, well, before any disease even takes hold, the body is spending this unimaginable amount of energy just to follow basic physical and chemical laws. It's this constant invisible battle.
It's humbling, isn't it? Because if we forget that foundational, just unrelenting need for survival and regulation, we miss the whole point of medicine. The body isn't just passive, it is proactively fighting every single second.
So let's just try to grasp the scale here. I still can't quite wrap my head around it. More than 65 trillion cells.
Trillion, yeah. An interdependent city of cells.
It's a massive city.
And that massive city has to operate within these astonishingly tight parameters. And that brings us to probably the single most important concept in all of physiology, homeostasis.
Homeostasis.
In its simplest form, it's just the body's ability to maintain a relative consistency in its own internal chemical and physical environment, the fluid surrounding those 65 trillion cells.
So it's kind of like the body's internal thermostat.
That's a great way to think about it. It's constantly adjusting temperature, pressure, chemistry, you name it.
Okay, so if we're aiming for consistency, what happens when it's threatened? Can you give us a tangible example of homeostasis just winning that fight?
A perfect example is core temperature. You step outside in winter, your external environment plunges maybe 30 degrees Celsius. The body absolutely cannot let its core temperature drop.
Because the enzymes stop working.
The enzymes stop working. So what happens? You shiver. That is your physiological control system using these tiny muscle contractions to generate heat, burning fuel, and successfully regulating your internal world against an external threat.
That makes it so much more real. So speaking of threats, what are the biggest, most life-threatening challenges that demand this constant control?
We can think of two major ones. First, the body is a, quote, warm, wet organism in a cool, dry, harsh world. So the threat is dehydration and hypothermia.
Okay.
But the second threat, it comes from inside us. It comes from the very process that gives us energy, our metabolism.
You're talking about waste products, CO2.
Exactly. We oxidize molecules to get energy, and that uses up tons of oxygen. But the byproduct, CO2, is a massive and immediate acid threat. If the body failed to remove it, the blood pH of 7.4 would just drop catastrophically.
And how catastrophic are we talking?
A calculation showed the pH would plummet all the way down toward 1.
1, from 7.4, which is slightly alkaline, down to a level that's incredibly acidic almost instantly.
Almost instantly.
That really puts the stakes into focus. Failure to remove CO2 means lethal acidosis, and it also highlights this extreme energy demand, especially for the brain. It needs glucose constantly.
So we need two things: incredibly efficient supply chain for fuel and oxygen, and a high-speed waste removal system for that acid.
Which brings us to the core organ systems. I mean, if failure means death in minutes, how does the body solve the oxygen and acid problem? This is where it gets amazing.
It all starts with basic physics. Oxygen moves into our cells by simple diffusion.
Which saves energy.
It saves energy for the cell, which is great. But diffusion is slow, and it only works over extremely short distances. So for oxygen to get to every single one of those 65 trillion cells, it has to be brought to within 100 micrometers.
100 micrometers, so that's a hard physical limit.
It's a hard limit. Any cell further away than that, and you just don't get oxygen, period.
Wow. So the body basically designed a transportation network to get within that 100 micrometer range of every single neighborhood in the cellular city.
And that network is the mechanical duo of the circulatory and respiratory systems. The circulatory system is the high-street highway, moving nutrients, oxygen, CO2, all of it. The respiratory system is the engine pulling in fresh oxygen and pushing out that acid-producing CO2.
It makes complete sense then why any, clinical dysfunction in the cardiovascular or pulmonary systems is so immediately terrifying.
Absolutely. The source material is clear. Death can occur in minutes if those systems fail to maintain that reach.
And you're saying none of this works unless the fluid is right?
None of it works. The volume and the chemical composition of that extracellular fluid has to be precisely managed. And that heavy regulatory job, that falls mostly to the renal system, our kidneys.
So we've got transport, fluid balance, energy. But how do all these systems coordinate? I mean, how does the body know there's a problem if things can fail in minutes?
It needs a rapid communication network. And that's the job of the neuroendocrine system, is how the body adapts, and it has two major speeds.
So the fast one has to be the nervous system.
Correct. The nervous system is like your instant messaging. It uses the electrolytes in our body fluids to create electrical signals, voltages, and currents that transmit information almost instantly.
But, if the nervous system is so fast, why would the body even need a slower system like hormones? Why not just use electricity for everything?
That's a great question. And it's really about efficiency and scale. The endocrine system is for long-distance broadcast messaging. It uses the circulatory system to send chemical signals, hormones everywhere.
Ah, so it's slower, but it reaches more places at once.
Exactly. So that integrated neuroendocrine system is essential for regulating the big picture stuff growth, metabolism, repair, defense.
And beyond that central control, the system also has these simple, almost subconscious reflexes just to keep us protected.
Right, think about all the things we take for granted.
Mhm.
The rhythm of the heart, pumping blood, the lungs moving.
Yeah.
But then you have the purely protective stuff. You touch a hot stove,
The withdrawal reflex?
the withdrawal reflex, your
Yeah.
hand snaps back before your brain even fully processes the pain. The cough reflex, scratch reflex. All of these are just fundamental neural circuits protecting tissues from immediate threats.
It's interesting, though, because those rapid muscle movements, they're just the beginning. And this is where the research takes this, just a profound turn. The fact that skeletal muscle isn't just for moving, it's actually an endocrine organ.
This changes everything. When skeletal muscle contracts, especially during exercise, it releases these signaling molecules called myokines.
Myokine.
And these myokines act like hormones. They circulate throughout the body and do far more than just local muscle repair. They're involved in, well, everything from metabolism to immune modulation.
Okay, so which specific ones are we talking about?
Well, the first one they identified was interleukin 6, or IL-6. It's secreted right into the bloodstream, and the amount is proportional to how long and how hard you exercise. And we now know that exercise-induced IL-6 provides systemic protection against several chronic diseases.
But the one that should really make everyone listening just sit up straight is the connection between muscle movement and brain growth.
That's brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. Exercise powerfully activates it. And while some of it acts locally in the muscle, a significant amount actually increases in the brain.
And the clinical insight here is huge.
It's monumental. This exercise-induced BDNS is the only known mechanism that directly stimulates the growth of new nerve tissue.
So you're saying long-term aerobic exercise is literally building a bigger brain. We're talking measurable enlargement in the hippocampus and cortex.
That's what the data shows. It has massive implications for something like dementia, which is defined by a loss of brain plasticity. It establishes physical activity as a fundamental neuroprotective strategy.
It's incredible.
And speaking of defense, we have to mention the autonomic defense system, specifically the vagus nerve.
Right.
This nerve sends these deep reflex signals that influence everything from your heart and GI function right down to inflammation levels.
And the research shows that stimulating that nerve can inhibit inflammatory mediators.
Which opens the door to a completely new, drug-free bioelectrical treatment for diseases like rheumatoid arthritis. Using electrical stimulation, we can potentially activate the body's own defense pathways to reduce inflammation. It's a huge shift.
This whole deep dive, from the 100 micrometer limit to BDNF, it all seems to lead to this final, really revolutionary paradigm shift in medicine. Historically, we had this very permanistic view of DNA.
Right, that DNA was the sole blueprint.
The blueprint, yeah.
But that view is just...
Yeah.
It's insufficient now. The DNA is the code, yes.
Yeah.
But the proteins are the workers. They do the work, muscle contraction, brain power, all of it. The code is only half the story.
And the most compelling proof that DNA isn't the whole story has to be identical twins.
Absolutely. If genetics were the final word, identical twins, same DNA, should have identical health outcomes.
But they don't.
They don't. We see striking differences. One twin might develop diabetes or obesity, the other doesn't. And these differences are rarely due to DNA mutation. So the question becomes, if the code is identical, what's causing the variation?
And the answer is this new field of epigenetics.
Epigenetics. It's regulation that operates at a level above the gene. It shows us that so many of our body's functions aren't fixed at birth. They're dynamically regulated by our environment.
How does that work?
Well, the epigenome is basically a series of molecular switches on the outside of the genes, turning the DNA on or off. This is the mechanism that told a cell to become a liver cell instead of a brain cell during your development.
But these switches aren't static. That's the staggering part.
They're not. Exercise, nutrition, stress, trauma, even social engagement, all of these things modify gene function. And these epigenetic changes can even be passed on to the next generation.
The clinical application of this is it's
Isn't it?
profound.
It is. When you look at the major chronic diseases, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, heart attacks, stroke, most cancers, you find this crucial 80-20 split.
Wait, hold on. You're saying only a small fraction of chronic disease is actually determined by our genes?
Precisely. The data shows that only about 15 to 20% of these life-altering diseases are strictly linked to genetics.
So if 15 to 20% is genetics, that means the other 80 to 85% is lifestyle and environment.
Overwhelmingly, it's a massive margin of personal control. And that's where physiology has shifted. We've gone from studying fixed structure-function relationships to analyzing epigenetics-induced functional relationships.
Which has huge implications for aging.
Enormous. A sedentary lifestyle accelerates the turning off of protective genes. It literally accelerates aging. A healthy lifestyle keeps the body physiologically younger through epigenetic change.
So what does this all mean for someone trying to learn this? This deep dive, it seems, provides this essential insight into the relentless integration the body needs just to function, and this convergence with epigenetics. It's a profound shift.
The practical implication is just so empowering. You are no longer doomed by your genes. The latest medical advances show the extraordinary influence you have over your health, your quality of life, and your aging process, simply by managing your lifestyle and environment. The power is truly in your hands.
That's a profound idea, and it brings us right back around to where we started, with muscle contractions. Given that simple exercise turns skeletal muscle into an endocrine organ, releasing BDNF, which is the only known way to grow new nerve tissue in the brain, what daily dosage of physical activity are you actively prioritizing to manage your own health and longevity through this epigenetic mechanism? We'll let you chew on that one.
A truly powerful thought to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fundamentals of survival.